If you've recently left a toxic relationship, you probably don't even recognize yourself anymore. You second guess every decision you make. You apologize for things that aren't your fault. You feel like a shell of the woman you used to be. And the worst part? You can't even remember the last time you trusted your own judgment about anything. I'm Elisa Schwartz, and over the past 7 years, I've worked with over 800 women who've walked out of toxic relationships feeling exactly like you do right now. Broken, exhausted, and convinced they'll never feel like themselves again. And I've been there too. I spent 2 years in a relationship that slowly eroded every ounce of confidence I had until I couldn't even order food at a restaurant without panicking about making the wrong choice. But leaving the relationship is just the first step. The real work, the hard work, is rebuilding yourself from the ground up when you don't even know who you are anymore. Because toxic relationships don't just break your heart, they break your sense of self. They break your ability to trust yourself. They break the very foundation of who you thought you were. But here's the good news. That foundation can be rebuilt. And in the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. I'm going to show you the exact 5 steps that helped me go from a woman who couldn't make eye contact with a cashier to someone who now coaches hundreds of women through their own transformations. And if I can do it, so can you. Okay, let's get into it. So first, we need to talk about why you feel this way, because understanding what happened to you is the first step in fixing it. And look, when most people talk about confidence after a toxic relationship, they treat it like you just need a pep talk or a new haircut. But that's not what's going on here. What happened to you isn't just low self-esteem, it's psychological conditioning. When you're in a toxic relationship, especially with a narcissist or an emotionally abusive partner, your reality gets systematically dismantled. Every time you expressed a need and got told you were being dramatic, that chipped away at your confidence. Every time you raised a concern and got told you were overreacting, that made you doubt yourself a little more. Every time you tried to set a boundary and got manipulated into backing down, that taught you that your judgment can't be trusted. And here's what makes it so insidious. It doesn't happen all at once. It's not like you wake up one day and suddenly you're a different person. It's gradual. It's 1,000 tiny moments over months or years where you learn that what you think doesn't matter, what you feel isn't valid, and what you want isn't important. And eventually, you stop trusting yourself completely. So, by the time you leave, you don't just have low confidence, you have what psychologists call learned helplessness. You've been conditioned to believe that your thoughts, feelings, and decisions are fundamentally flawed. And that conditioning doesn't just disappear the day you walk out the door. Now, why does this matter? Because if you don't understand that this was done to you, you'll think there's something inherently wrong with you. You'll think you're just naturally weak or broken or damaged. But you're not. Your confidence wasn't lost. It was systematically taken from you. And that means it can be systematically rebuilt. So stop beating yourself up for not bouncing back immediately. Stop comparing yourself to the confident woman you used to be and wondering why you can't just get over it. You're not starting from where you were before the relationship. You're starting from a place where your entire sense of self was deliberately dismantled. And rebuilding from that takes time, intention, and the right strategies. And that brings me to the first actual step in rebuilding, and it's something most people completely skip. Look, the biggest mistake I see women make when trying to rebuild confidence is they try to make massive changes all at once. They think that they need to completely reinvent themselves. They need a new job, new friends, new life, and then they freeze because it's too overwhelming. So here's what you do instead. You should start with micro decisions, tiny choices that rebuild your ability to trust yourself, one decision at a time. Because here's what you need to understand. Confidence isn't a feeling you wake up with one day. Confidence is the result of making decisions and seeing that those decisions lead to good outcomes. It's evidence-based. You need proof that you can trust yourself again. So let me give you exactly what this looks like in practice. When I first left my toxic relationship, I couldn't even decide what to watch on Netflix without spiraling. I'd spend 30 minutes scrolling, convinced that whatever I picked would be wrong. So I started smaller than that. I started with breakfast. Every morning, I'd ask myself, what do I actually want to eat right now? Not what I should eat, not what would be healthy or impressive, just what I genuinely wanted. And then I'd make it, and I'd eat it, and I'd notice that nothing bad happened. Nobody criticized me, nobody told me I was making the wrong choice. I just ate breakfast, and it was fine. And here's what's beautiful about this. Every time you make a small decision and honor it, you're sending your nervous system a message. You're telling your brain, I can trust my own judgment. I made a choice and it worked out. And slowly, decision by decision, you start to rebuild that foundation. Now, here's your practical implementation for this. I want you to identify 3 areas where you can practice micro decisions every single day: what you eat, what you wear, what you do with 30 minutes of free time. These are low-stakes decisions where there's no real wrong answer. And for the next 2 weeks, I want you to make those decisions quickly, without second-guessing, and without asking anyone else for permission or validation. So when you're standing in front of your closet, you pick an outfit in under 2 minutes based on what feels right. You don't ask your friend if it looks okay. You don't change 3 times. You just decide and move forward. When you have a free evening, you choose what you want to do. Watch TV, read a book, take a bath, whatever. You don't scroll your phone waiting for someone to tell you what you should be doing. You decide. And look, I know this sounds almost stupidly simple. You're probably thinking, but Elisa, I left a toxic relationship. I have real problems, and you're telling me to focus on what I eat for breakfast? Yes, because those real problems, the big decisions about your future, those require confidence. And you can't build confidence by starting with the hardest decisions. You build it by proving to yourself over and over again with small decisions that you can trust yourself. I had a client who couldn't leave her house for 3 months after her divorce because she was so paralyzed by decision-making. She'd stand at her front door, hand on the knob, and spiral about whether going to the grocery store was the right choice. So we started with even smaller decisions: which mug to use for her coffee, which chair to sit in, which room to spend the morning in. And within 6 weeks of practicing micro-decisions, she went to the grocery store alone, and then she went to a coffee shop, and then she applied for a job she actually wanted, instead of just taking whatever felt safe. The micro decisions built the foundation for the major ones. Now, let's talk about the second step, when that internal voice shows up the second you start trusting yourself again, and exactly how to deal with it. There's something that's going to happen as you start making decisions again. You're going to hear a voice in your head telling you that you're doing it wrong, that you're being selfish, that you're making a mistake, that you should have picked something else. And here's what you need to understand: that voice isn't yours, it's theirs. When you spend months or years with someone who constantly criticizes your choices, their voice gets internalized. It becomes the soundtrack in your head. So even when they're not physically there anymore, you're still hearing their commentary on everything you do. And if you don't learn to separate your authentic voice from their internalized voice, you'll never fully rebuild your confidence. So let me show you how to do this. The next time you make a decision and immediately feel that wave of doubt or criticism, I want you to pause and ask yourself one question. Is this thought mine, or is this something he would have said? And be honest, because most of the time when you really examine that critical voice, you'll realize it sounds exactly like them. Let's say you decide to go out with friends on a Friday night, and immediately you feel guilty. That inner voice tells you, you should be home. You're being irresponsible. What are people going to think? Now pause. Is that actually what you believe, or is that what your ex would have said to control you? Because if it's the second one, you don't have to listen to it. And here's the practice I want you to start implementing today. When you catch that critical voice, I want you to actively talk back to it, out loud if you need to. Say, "That's not my thought, that's his voice, and I don't have to listen to it anymore." And then I want you to replace it with what you actually think. So, for example, when you hear, "You're being selfish for taking time for yourself," you should pause, recognize that's his voice, and you say out loud, "That's not my thought. Taking care of myself isn't selfish. I deserve rest." And then you follow through with whatever you are going to do. Now, I know this feels awkward at first. You're going to feel ridiculous talking to yourself. But here's what's happening on a neurological level. You're literally rewiring the neural pathways in your brain. You're breaking the automatic connection between decision-making and self-criticism, and you're building a new pathway between decision-making and self-trust. I had a client, one of my clients, Rachel, who realized that 90% of her negative self-talk was just her ex-husband's voice on repeat. Once she started separating his voice from hers, she said it was like someone turned down the volume on the constant criticism in her head. And for the first time in 5 years, she could hear what she actually wanted. So start paying attention. When you feel bad about a choice you made, ask yourself if that's really your authentic feeling or if it's conditioning. When you doubt yourself, ask if that doubt is based on actual evidence or just an internalized critical voice. And when you catch yourself using the exact phrases your ex used to use, stop and rewrite the script. Because your authentic voice, the one that got buried under years of criticism and control, that voice is still there. And the more you practice listening for it and honoring it, the stronger it gets. Okay, now that you know how to handle your inner voice, you also need to prove to yourself that you can handle things when they go wrong, because if you don't, you'll never build a complete, unbreakable confidence. And that's what leads us to the next step. Look, when it comes to rebuilding confidence, you don't just need proof that you can make good decisions. You need proof that you can handle it when things don't go perfectly. Because one of the things toxic relationships do is convince you that you're incapable of managing problems on your own. Think about it. How many times did your ex swoop in to fix something you were handling, implying you couldn't do it yourself? How many times did they point out a mistake you made and act like it was proof you were incompetent? How many times did they solve a problem and then hold it over your head like you owed them for saving you? So now, even though you're out, you're terrified of messing up. You're terrified of making a mistake because you've been conditioned to believe that mistakes prove you're fundamentally incapable. And that fear keeps you small. It keeps you from trying new things, taking risks, or trusting yourself with anything important. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to intentionally build evidence that you can handle problems. And we're going to do it by letting yourself make small, low-stakes mistakes and then successfully navigating them. Let me give you a real example. Let's say you've been wanting to try a new recipe, but you're scared you'll mess it up. Instead of avoiding it, you make the recipe. And let's say you do mess it up. You burn the chicken, you oversalt the sauce. It's not good. Now, the old pattern would be to spiral. See, I can't do anything right. I'm so stupid. I shouldn't have even tried. But the new pattern is this. You look at the burned chicken and you say, okay, that didn't work. What's my next move? And then you figure it out. Maybe you order takeout. Maybe you make something else. Maybe you eat cereal for dinner and laugh about it. The point is, you handle it. You don't collapse. You don't need someone to rescue you. You adapt and move forward. And every time you do that, every time you encounter a problem and successfully navigate it on your own, you're building evidence. You're proving to yourself that you're competent, capable, and resourceful. You're proving that mistakes aren't catastrophic. They're just information. Now, here's the practical application. I want you to start keeping what I call a competence log. This is just a note on your phone or a page in a journal where you write down every single problem you solve on your own. And I mean everything. You figured out why your Wi-Fi wasn't working, you handled a difficult conversation with your kid's teacher, you navigated a confusing bill, you got lost and found your way home. These things seem mundane, but they're evidence. And when you're in a moment of doubt, when that voice in your head is telling you that you can't handle something, you pull out that log and you read it. You remind yourself of all the proof you already have that you're capable. I started doing this after my breakup, and within 3 months, I had 2 full pages of things I'd handled on my own, things that 6 months earlier I would have been convinced I needed help with. And every time I added something to that list, I felt a little bit stronger, a little bit more like myself. Because confidence isn't just about believing you'll succeed, it's about knowing that even if you don't, you'll figure it out. And the only way to know that is to practice it. So stop trying to be perfect. Start trying to be resilient. Make the mistakes, solve the problems, write them down, and watch the evidence pile up. But there's one more piece to this puzzle that ties everything together, and it's to reclaim your identity outside of the relationship. The deepest wound that toxic relationships leave is that you don't just lose your confidence, you lose your sense of who you are. Because when you're with someone who constantly tells you what to think, how to feel, what to want, you stop knowing what's actually yours and what's just conditioning. So now that you're out, you're not just rebuilding confidence, you're rebuilding identity. And that means you need to start asking yourself a question you probably haven't asked in years. Who am I when nobody's watching? What do I actually like? What do I actually want? And look, I know that sounds like a simple question, but for most women coming out of toxic relationships, it's terrifying because the honest answer is often, I have no idea. You've spent so long being who you needed to be to keep the peace that you don't know who you are when you're allowed to just be. So here's how we figure it out. We experiment. We try things. We give ourselves permission to be curious without committing to anything. Let me show you what this looks like practically. Maybe you used to love painting before the relationship, but he always made fun of your art, so you stopped. Now, you don't have to suddenly become a professional painter. You just buy a cheap set of watercolors and see if it still brings you joy. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you realize you're into something completely different now. All of that is okay. Or maybe you never had hobbies because all your time was spent managing his emotions and walking on eggshells. So now you try things just to see what resonates. You take a dance class, you join a book club, you learn how to garden. You're not trying to find your passion or your purpose. You're just collecting data about what makes you feel alive. And here's what's beautiful about this process. Every time you try something and pay attention to how it makes you feel, you're reconnecting with your authentic self. You're learning to trust your preferences again. You're rebuilding the part of you that knows what you like and what you don't, independent of anyone else's opinion. Now, I want to give you a very specific exercise that helped me more than anything else. It's called the yes, no, maybe list. Here's how it works. You should take a piece of paper and you divide it into 3 columns. Yes, no, maybe. And then you start listing things. Activities, foods, music, people, places, anything. And you should not overthink it. Just ask yourself, does this feel like a yes, a no, or a maybe? And you trust your gut. You're not asking if it's practical or if other people would approve. You're just asking what resonates with you right now. So maybe you write down going to concerts, and it's a yes. Hosting dinner parties is a no. Learning to surf is a maybe. You're not committing to any of this. You're just clarifying what actually sounds appealing to you versus what you think you should want. And then over the next few months, you start saying yes to more of the things in your yes column. You say no to the things in your no column without guilt, and you try the things in your maybe column to see if they move to yes or no. I had a client who realized through this exercise that she actually hated going to bars, even though she'd spent 5 years going to bars every weekend because that's what her ex wanted to do. Once she gave herself permission to admit that, She stopped going, and she started going to poetry readings instead, which she loved. And that one shift, that one act of honoring her authentic preference, changed everything. She started making decisions based on what she actually wanted, and her confidence skyrocketed. Because here's the truth. You can't be confident in a life that doesn't actually fit you. You can't trust yourself if you're still living according to someone else's preferences. So reclaiming your identity isn't just about feeling good. It's about building a life that's actually yours. And when you're living a life that reflects who you really are, confidence isn't something you have to force. It just naturally emerges. Okay, now you know the 5 steps. Understand what happened to you, start with micro decisions, separate your voice from their voice, build evidence of your competence, and reclaim your identity outside of the relationship. These 5 steps alone will transform how you see yourself if you actually implement them. If this resonated with you, I want you to do 2 things. First, share this with another woman who needs to hear it, someone who's struggling to recognize herself after a toxic relationship, someone who thinks she'll never feel confident again. Send her this video. It might be exactly what she needs. And second, drop a comment telling me which of these 5 steps hit you the hardest. Which one are you going to start working on today? I read every single comment and I love hearing from you. Now, if you want more help with this, check out the Surviving to Thriving Guide. It's basically a 6-pillar transformation system that's helped hundreds of burned out single mothers reclaim their identity, energy, and hope, and finally feel like themselves again, be better moms for their kids, and create a life that actually feels worth living. I've put all my expertise working with more than 800 single moms for the past 7 years and made it available for everyone to benefit from. Take a look at it below in the description or in the first pinned comment. And never forget that I see you. I know how hard this is. I know you look in the mirror sometimes and don't recognize the woman staring back. I know you wonder if you'll ever feel like yourself again. But you will. Not the old version of yourself. Someone stronger. Someone who knows what she's survived and knows what she's capable of. That woman is already inside you. We're just helping her remember who she is. I'll see you in the next video.